discuss which section do we need to write first. That is the method section. We usually deep dive firstly. So what are the different parts of a manuscript? Now we are going to discuss that in detail. So in writing a manuscript, development of manuscript follows the IMRAD flow, where I stands for introduction, M stands for methodology, then results section, A for analysis or abstract where applicable, and the discussion section into the manuscript. But that doesn't mean that we have to write all of these in this order. The order can be your choice. As I already told, the first thing that we usually write is the method section, then followed by the results section. Going ahead, because we have written the results, then we can just interpret those results into the discussion section, and then introduction and the discussion section usually go in parallel to each other or followed by each other. Then we go about writing the abstract and then the title. So introduction. So opt your story sequence, what you want to write into your introduction, where it generally flows like this, where we firstly briefly discuss about the background to disease or drug or epidemiology or the topic of your manuscript. So the current standards of care, treatment, recommendations, and what the guidelines are. So then you have to specify if you are talking about a disease or a drug, then firstly you have to describe the basic of that particular drug or disease, followed by the standard of care. For example, if you are talking about rheumatoid arthritis, then you will describe a little bit about what is the standard of care or what are the other interventions which are being specified by the guidelines available. Then gaps in our understanding is the next point that you write, and along with your references. Focus on the relevance to clinical practice or rationale to why the study was done. Then you write why I have done this study, although you have identified your gap, but then also you have to write that to fill this gap, this is the rationale for my study to conduct. For example, if in the gap you found that there are 10 particular studies conducted for that particular drug, but still a standard of care or a recommendation in the guideline has not been incorporated due to adverse events, for example, then you will write that I am conducting this safety study to understand about the safety aspect of this particular drug. So study objectives, the last part of the introduction section usually goes as about writing the study objectives, what are the main study questions or other secondary questions as applicable. So this is how the introduction section flows, with a brief background of the drug, disease or the particular topic you are talking about, the current status of that particular drug, that particular innovation, that particular intervention, that particular agent or actor what you want to study about. Then what is the gap in the understanding, then focus on the relevance or the rationale of your study. Why did you do the study particularly, and what are the main study objectives along with the secondary objectives into your introduction section. Only introduce, do not discuss. See, we are connecting the literature with our study into this section, but we don't have to write about their results and their interpretations into the introduction section. It should be very brief, ranging from 500 to 750 words depending on the total word count of your manuscript. So it's not a discussion section, remember that aspect. Then goes the materials and methods section. What we have to write into it, what needs to come into it, and what the flow would be. So the points to be considered while writing materials and methods would be like: be concise, refer to the standard procedures only, write the study population, key inclusion and exclusion criteria of your population or your target audience or your audience that you selected. If it is a questionnaire study, then why did you select those, what kind of participant did you select to be considered for your questionnaire study. Then the study design, for example, it's a parallel, crossover, observational study, it's a systematic review, what kind of study design it is. So all you have to include that into this section, followed by, if it is an interventional study, then drug doses, treatment duration, group allocation, everything you need to incorporate. Another important aspect that needs to be included into material and methods section is the ethical conduct statement. See, for any study, there are ethical guidelines available, there are ethical agencies which assess the study and then give the approval or non-approval for that particular study accordingly. So, if you have already received the approval for that particular study from an ethical committee, then you have to state which ethical committee did you consulted, did you submitted your study, and they have given the approval. For example, if it is a clinical trial, then declaration of Helsinki would be the one that would be given, and the institutional review board would be the one who would be giving the approvals and go ahead for that particular study. This statement mandatorily should be part of your manuscript. So, normally institutes have their institutional ethical review boards or review committee that would look into the details of your study and give the approvals accordingly, even if you are conducting an observational study. Then comes the details of the outcomes that you are going to or you have assessed into your study. The primary objective, secondary, exploratory, whatever kind of parameters that you have assessed during the conduct of your study, you need to mention all those outcomes. Then describe the statistical method, that is the statistical power, sample size, method of randomization, method of sample selection, and what the statistical method that you have employed is, or any software that you have used to analyze your results. All these should be part of material and methods. So, see, all those things that we have incorporated into material and methods would be your population of study, the study design along with the ethical statement, the outcomes and the statistical aspect of your study. So, everything should be part of material and method. Do remember that material and methods should be so much explicitly written that if anybody wants to replicate your study, then he or she would be able to achieve the similar results as yours, because exactly word to word what you have written has been followed by someone else also, and the results should be the same. So, define but not describe the population. You have to define what kind of population you have selected, but you don't need to describe each and every aspect of the population. For example, if it is an observational study and you are a questionnaire based study and you are going to talk to patients having depression, that you don't need to describe the rest of the things, that height should be this, weight should be this, he should be from this area. That doesn't need. Your inclusion criteria is the patient having MDD or depression. Then comes the results section, where follow the flow of narration as in the method section. What does this mean? Mean that if you have described in your method section that your primary outcome is efficacy, then don't start the results section with the safety section. Follow the sections that has been followed in the method section. The primary objective, then secondary objectives. In secondary objectives also, the sequence what you have used in your method section should be followed in the results section as well. In the method section, you have written the statistical analysis at the last, then follow the same sequence and write anything specific out of statistical analysis at the last of the results section. Describe population at baseline and current disposition. So, you have to describe, now you have to describe what kind of population was part of your particular study at the baseline, at the day when you have selected them. Then report primary outcome measures first, then describe the tables, figures, text. Do not duplicate the result. See, what you have already described in your table or figure, then you don't need to add the same detailed description into your text. So, you can just say summary of variable A has been described in table 1. That's sufficient to be written into your text, and don't write what that variable A shows compared to variable B or whatever you want to add according to your results, but it should be explicitly described at one place only, no duplication. Indicate clearly with presenting post hoc data if you have. Extremely important to define safety for human studies. If you are writing anything about a particular intervention into a human, or you are writing about clinical trials, or it is a human studies, then describing just the efficacy would not complete your manuscript. It should have the safety data to be given the equal importance as you have given to your efficacy. The manuscript should be balanced. The results section should be well balanced with efficacy as well as safety results into your manuscript. Don't justify or explain findings. This I am reiterating again and again. Don't justify or explain the findings into your results section. Results should only be presented and not discussed here, because this is not the right section to discuss your results. Do not present data for which methods are not described. For example, you are not talking about overall survival in your methods section, but you have described the results of overall survival into your results section. That is not the correct way of presenting your results. Whatever you have described in your methods section should be part of your results section, or if you want to have additional results, then methods section should also describe about those result outcomes, right? So outcomes should be listed, well listed in your methods section, and then all those outcomes that have been listed in methods section should be described into your results section. If you have written 10 outcomes that you have assessed into your methods section, then results section should also have exactly the 10 outcomes described. No outcome should be missed out of results section if you have already described that in result and method section, or vice versa. So how to present the data? Now we are discussing about what to include in tables or what in the figures, how we can best present our data. So tables versus figures. In tables, for comparing descriptive data, when numerical data is required to be presented with p-values, n by n, n versus percentage values, so this kind of data, then we can use the tables. And avoid single column table. Single column table doesn't mean anything. We don't have anything to look upon, what is in the rows and what is in the columns. So single column table doesn't mean anything. So don't use tables in case of data which is single, which doesn't need any comparison. So compare from left to right, not from right to left. So include units in heading is also very important when we present our data in the tables format. So what we generally describe in figures, where multiple data points are there, variance over them, survival plots. For this kind of data, it becomes very easy to interpret from the figures. So always use figures for such data. Comparing multiple parameters across groups, then it becomes really difficult in a table when there are multiple parameters you want to compare. So then it becomes figures becomes really easy. For example, anything to be presented in a bar diagram, you can have 5 different bar diagrams to be easily compared to that in tables. So use error bars wherever applicable. Avoid 3D graphs and cluttered figures. So 3D graphs can be used, not very much necessary in your oral presentations, but when you are preparing for a manuscript, then 3D graphs doesn't work, because sometimes people read through black and white pictures, so 3D graphs actually doesn't help the reader to understand the figures correctly. So avoid 3D graphs and cluttered figures. So check instructions to author for maximum number of accepted and format requirements. So instruction to author, that is the journal guidelines. You should be very clear what is the maximum number of tables or figures are accepted in that particular manuscript. Manuscript type also changes the number of tables and figures. For example, in a review article, the tables or figures may vary compared to what an original research article is accepted for. So you have to be very sure what kind of article you are writing and what kind of guidelines the journal is giving you to include the tables and figures, and also what is the format requirement for the tables and the figures. For sometimes we to make our manuscript look good, we use the colored tables or figure tables where one line is of one row is of different color, second row is of different color, and such kind of formatting we try to incorporate. But what are the formatting requirements the journal is telling you is the most important thing you have to adhere to, right? They may become non-adherence to the journal requirements may result in rejection of your articles. So use informative titles with clinical focus. So the titles which we are using for tables and figures should be very clear and give the information that is being described into that particular table or figure. So now comes the discussion part of the manuscript, which is the critical part of a clinical paper. Explaining the meaning of the results to the reader is the purpose of the discussion section of a paper, right? Now you have written that this is the method that I followed, this was the gap analysis for which I conducted this study, now these are the results which I found. Now be clear while writing your discussion section where now you are at the very first time you are interpreting your results, you are interpreting the findings, you are telling your reader what exactly these findings mean, right? So there are few things which needs to be avoided when writing a discussion section. Over interpretation of the results. For example, we tend to over express or use more adjectives while writing your results. For example, we write this was very beneficial in patients. Rather writing such kind of adjectives, you just write the overall survival in this particular patients was higher compared to those in the uh, section B or control part. So don't over interpret your results, because the purpose of writing a manuscript is just to present what you have found, not over interpretation. For example, you will ask why we can't use or why we should not use the adjectives in the discussion part. Now we are interpreting the results, then we can use. You have conducted one particular study in one particular area, but there are hundreds of studies which have already been conducted or will be conducted in future. So it doesn't mean that your results are in concurrence with the rest of that 100 studies which has already been conducted. So there must be some reasons. Your study must have some limitations to conduct that particular study. So that doesn't mean that what you are saying that it was over beneficial, it was very beneficial, that doesn't mean it is a correct form of presenting your results, right? So don't over interpret your results. Then unwarranted speculations. You have to discuss about the results which you have got. You don't have to predict the future. For example, sometimes we get very enthusiastic and write that, oh, this might be the future of rheumatoid arthritis treatment. So don't use such kind of statements. Avoid any speculations. You have to just discuss about the results what you have already got. Inflating the importance of findings. Don't inflate. Don't over interpret. Again, the point first and the third is similar. Don't inflate the importance of your finding. It is reported just as finding. Statements that are not supported by the data, this should be avoided. This should not be part of your manuscript. You can't write any statement into your discussion section or any other part of the manuscript where for which you have not provided the supportive data, right? Supporting data is very much necessary to write anything, any statement about any particular outcome into your discussion section. So These are the very much important points that you have to keep in mind while discussing your results into your discussion part of the manuscript, right? So the most one, all of these are very important: over interpretation, unwarranted speculation, inflating the importance of findings, and the statements that are not supported by the data. You have to keep these in mind. So the discussion section provides short reminder of your objectives. So this is the flow how we go about in the discussion section. State the main findings but do not report the results. So you don't have to repeat the results again and again, but it's just the main findings you can just write into your interpretation format. The main question should be answered here. Now you have in your objectives, in your study question, you have said that I'll answer these questions. So the similar needs to be carried forward in the discussion section, where you say that through these findings I have answered my research question dash and dash. Then compare results with the findings of other authors and explain any difference of findings. This is what I said earlier also, reiterating again and again that now this is the part where you need to compare your results with the findings of other authors and explain any differences in the findings, why these differences came upon. For example, a similar study was conducted in Japan, and now you conducted this in India. So this is one thing. You can say that the geographical conditions, the environment around, the genetics of the body, that all has caused the differences in the findings of your result and that particular results that has already been conducted. So you have to compare those results and try to find why there are differences in your findings and the findings from the similar study that has been conducted by someone else at some other area. Describe the strengths and weaknesses of the studies and the future need. See, this is very important. No study is complete in itself, and there are further requirements that somebody else can take that further research into future and find something new. So you have to describe that I did this, now you can do this, but still there are some gaps that needs to be filled upon by someone else in future. So you have to describe all those strengths and weaknesses along with the future needs into your discussion section. Discuss the meaning of the study and its implication for physicians, policy makers, or patients, or your audience. So you have to, at the end of the discussion section, you have to tell what are the main implications for your audience. Audience you have selected well before writing your manuscript, so you know that what kind of one-liner I have to tell to my audience. So this becomes the last section of the discussion part. Reiterate your key conclusion is the main part of the discussion section at the start. So again I am reiterating that there are some word counts that are limited to your different sections. So generally 500 words we give to introduction section, then the method section again 500 to 750 words. Then results get the maximum chunk of your word count, which goes from 1000 to 1500 to 2500 words, and then again the discussion parts become 750 words to the max of 1000 words. This is how you distribute the word count according to the journal. If the journal allows a greater than 7000 or 8000 words, then you can increase the proportion in each section accordingly. So this is how we plan our manuscript, where the word counts are also specified, what needs to be included also is specified, and how to write them is also, you have some do's and don'ts for each of the section that you have to keep in your mind to be included. Thank you.